there was this huge hope somehow, maybe then a change is coming super fast.
Even when we had these huge strikes with hundreds of thousands of people in different cities, the politics didn't change.
What are you going to do if they don't respond?
For 2019, what was meaningful or powerful in 2019, maybe for 2020, we need another additional layer to that makes people feel inspired. So maybe in many ways we need to find ways to then start naming also the challenges that, like, despite bringing so many people in the streets, why haven't we seen clear changes? And maybe then, I don't know what else it could be, but then we need to power up the game. I think like that would be great.
So today we're here with Tonny Nowshin, who is a climate justice and degrowth activist based in Berlin. Before we start, my name is Elias König, and the interview that you're listening to is part of a whole series of interviews I conducted for a research project at Institute for Advanced Sustainability Studies. In these interviews, I ask many amazing activists and researchers from different communities what it means for them to strike for climate justice and to share their thoughts on the future of the movement. I learned so much from these conversations, and I hope that they can be valuable to you too. If you have any thoughts, please do not hesitate to comment here or to get in touch directly. But now, without further ado, here's the episode.
Thank you, Elias. Thank you for inviting me. So yeah, as you said, I'm based in Berlin, but I'm originally from Bangladesh. I grew up there and I came to Germany in 2016. So I've been working very closely with different German movements on many different entry points. So with the degrowth movement, I've also worked quite a few times with Fridays, XR, and also in the Gelände here, also with the different groups in Rhineland, the cold resistance there, and also in Leipzig, where there was this cold resistance, again, Mibrag. So that's kind of have moved through many different movement spaces, or have lots of course, friends, comrades, and collaborated, discussed on different projects. So one thing that for last one, or in a way that like I rallied with or tried to make the debate more clearer or prominent within the climate movement, as well as in broader outer public in Germany, has been around anti-racism and how climate change, the climate crisis, is not a technical crisis, that it's fundamentally like a deep social justice issue, and where we need to also talk about other social justices, other problems that also include economic problems. So to really solve the climate crisis, I think that's kind of the area of my work. So fundamentally, I believe that climate movement, or the climate struggle for climate, has to be also anti-racist and intersectional and anti-capitalist. So that's kind of the idea, or kind of the belief, that I've been mobilizing with and working with different groups on.
Great. And since we also want to talk a little bit about the climate strike movement in this series, so Fridays for Future and its allied organizations, I would be very curious to know how you remember how the movement started. What did it change in the realm of the climate justice movement? What do you think made it special, and how did you perceive it at the time?
Yeah, I think it changed a lot in a way, because I remember in 2017, 2018, there was a time when it felt like nothing was happening, and you would read the reports, you would read the IPCC reports, the projections, and it would feel like, hey, like, am I crazy, or the world is crazy? Like, why aren't we doing more? Why isn't everybody talking about this? It really felt very bizarre, very absurd. And I remember when, like, one of the first things when I read the news of like this young Swedish girl sitting in front of the parliament and saying like, what's the point of going to school where there's no future? And I remember how much it resonated, and I was like, yes, like if it's, and it felt like this is what was needed, because this is like the truth needed to be told in this very clear form, and in very like kind of smacking to the power, to the status quo, and then to this blindness, to this complete deafness that was there. And I think what also happened for me, and I'm sure for many others, that you didn't feel as alone anymore. Like when it really became big, when it was really inspiring and amazing to see, because when all the students, like when the whole strike spread all over the world, when all of the kids really then started coming to the streets and striking every Friday, it was really, really inspiring, because it felt like you were not alone. Like it didn't feel then, okay, I'm not crazy, like the world is crazy and we need to do something about it. And it felt like something was happening. So that was really a great moment to then see that happening. And then of course it was very close, like when Friday started and then the XR, those were very close timing, if I remember, like the way I remember it, like it was kind of like very back to back, this big two movements kind of coming up and taking then the whole discourse, the attention of the world, and at the same time capturing the energy and really getting lots of people out there in the streets and starting the debate. Then it started feeling like, yeah, this is where we need to be. And then of course there was this huge hope somehow, probably also like many others, I felt maybe, yeah, then a change is coming super fast, or things would be very different, because I think before that it was unimaginable to the scale that the school strike started happening, and then this whole civil disobedience under XR started happening. So that was a really great moment, very inspiring, and yeah, feeling like not being alone, or not questioning your understanding of the world and yeah, of the crisis.
Right. And of course, even though there was millions of people on the streets in 2019, and there was a lot of promises politically, a lot of cities and businesses declared climate emergencies. Now, a couple of years later, we can see that actually the emissions still kept rising, and politically we did not see a large change. So why do you think that is, and how can we explain that discrepancy between so many people going to the streets on the one hand and so little action on the other hand?
Yeah, I think it's it clearly just shows the core of the problem, or what has always been. It's the people who are in the power. They really want to keep their status quo. So the like people who are behind the crisis, who have been always there, because we know more and more how much lobbying money all of these fossil fuel companies have been spending. And for a longest period of time, they tried to spread lies. Like even 5 years ago, it was super normal that you would see so much online trolling, or people saying, yeah, every 1,000 years, there's always this ice melting. What's the big deal? It's nature. It always happens. It's not because of humans, blah, blah. Like this was so much common, this whole climate denial, all this narrative. Now it's not as much, and it has moved to a different front. But what I'm saying is that because there has always been, before the movement got even so big and strong, the lobbying and this anti-climate lobby was always strong, and all of this. And in some way, I think I started also believing, like before there was a time when I was younger, I didn't believe that there is evil in the world. I thought it's just a misunderstanding. And when you can convince people, everybody would see the reason and they would change. And now I don't. I start believing like there is evil, and there are people who intentionally, knowing what's wrong, knowing what's harming others, would still keep doing this. And I think this is basically it. It just really makes the front line starker and starker. And there's no area for us to think anymore like, oh, maybe they're just not understanding, maybe they just need to have better solutions, maybe we need to convince them more, maybe they think, because there was even a time when there was this whole discussion, oh, even if the government and leaders and businesses try to move, people wouldn't be there, they need support of people, which is also a lie now we see, right? So I think it's really basically comes down to who benefits from this structure, who is in power, and how does their brain work. And I think this is the same problem that was already before climate crisis in our economic system, in our society, that the privileged one, the ones who were making money at the cost of greater commons, still are wanting to make money. And now when we move into the finest layers of policy suggestions, how to move finances, how to change agriculture, how to change energy system, we see again and again that it's about then like it's still, there's resistance, there's money going into lobbying, there's still still trying to make the last bit of money. There is still this discussion like, yeah, even if all of the money leaves fossil fuel, there would be some people who would still look at, oh, you can still make money now investing in oil and gas. and still do it and not think of the longer terms. It's really, that's why the battle is so difficult, because it's not anymore about making clear what people want. It's not anymore because it's clear. I think if anybody wants to know, it's very clear what people want, what we all of us want. It's really now forcing and defeating, I think, yeah, clearly I believe like evil people who are still stopping and just looking at their own limited interest and just cashing out our planet. And now it's kind of really stopping that. And that's the reason why we haven't seen very strong changes, even though, yeah, 2019 climate strike was so inspiring.
Right. So do you think that's also a conversation that has become more prominent in the movement, sort of the idea that the climate crisis is embedded in these structural inequalities? Do you think that's something that people have started discussing a bit more since the first wave of climate strikes?
I think there has been this discussion, but at the same time, I also see that, as I said, like now a lot of the discussion has moved to many different intricate layers, and it's kind of like, how do they call it? Like the evil is in the details, or like this, and then the more, because the initial idea was always that it was not upon the movement to come up with every solution. It was not upon the movement to provide all the detailed suggestions. It was about making clear what people want. It was making clear, creating a social ground so that the governments and the leaders could push forward the change that we need. But now I think in many cases, at least for the case of Germany, I know that it's about a lot of those fine line about what's the policy then, and then what should be the demand, and what are, like, we now have all the responsibility to come up with the best talking points about EU taxonomy, best talking points about East African crude oil pipeline, best talking points about this Russia-Ukraine war, and then the gas price and what it means then for the government to impose a cut, like stop buying fossil fuels from Russia or not. So, and this was never supposed to be like that, or like, because there are researchers, there are lots of experts who could come up with what we really need, which direction we need to walk. And now, because the movement has showed they have influence, they have power, and now there's this pull towards then engaging with another layer of this complicated politics, which sometimes again feels like it's like a rabbit hole, and it takes away a lot of the movement power, and then we're like, we don't know which is the best way to then go. Or so in some ways, I think this was originally never supposed to be our work in many ways, right? We wanted to set the intention, we needed to give like the mandate, and we need people with the right intention, with the right mandate to run. And I think that's kind of also like a big challenge and struggle now.
Right. So before the movement also became engaged in sort of different societal roles, I think it's, at least for the recent climate strike movement, its main form of action was the climate strike. And I'm curious as to what you think about this, but it seems to me that this term climate strike is very interesting, because strikes are a key form of action in many different social movements, in the labor movement, of course, but also there are women's strikes, anti-racist strikes, and so on. So I'm wondering if we're thinking about the term climate strike, and how climate strikes can build pressure exactly to change these things. What do you understand to be a climate strike?
I think for me, climate strike really is very strongly connected to the school strikes, in a way that it's the very first time where, with the demand of taking climate action, a regular long-term campaign started. Like, it was like every Friday, it was continuous, it spread all across the world, and the demand was very clear that take action against, like, acknowledge there is a climate emergency, start taking actions. so for me, as I said, so whenever I hear climate strike or climate strikers, I always expect a youth group, and with the demand, very clear demand that that we need to address the climate crisis, we need to take actions, we need to talk about climate emergency. And I think the other bit that you were saying in terms of other forms of strike, I think we see more collaboration. Maybe we need to see more and more. And to add to my last point, like at the same time, this is not to say that I think, or no one would ever say that it's a bad thing that the movement ended up getting all engaged into all of those fine details, because I think that also means like we have way more even young representatives in parliament. We have more like even youth strikers coming into movement, taking up political positions, who I think is really amazing. We need those people in these positions, and we see more and more young people who are being shaped by the movement, who have become politicized, because there was this huge vacuum before the youth strike started in terms of young people being politicized and getting engaged and talking about social issues, right? So in that regard, it's really amazing because it has drawn a large number of youth and mobilized, given them tools to organize. And we have seen like amazing organizing that also is new and is crazy, very wonderful, decentralized organizing. So in many ways, that's amazing and powerful. And I think in terms of this then connecting with other movements, when to expand and then to also have knowledge about how the climate demands and the climate justice demands sometimes are also socially blind, or can be, if not aware, politically aware enough, could be unjust, could be very privileged. And I think those education also have taken place. Like in that way, I think the movement has matured very wonderfully. And yeah, and then that could be then the next steps of climate strike joining union strike, or climate strike joining women's strike, or those kind of work. And I think that's also the area that we are exploring more.
Great. I would love to hear more about your own perception of how then the movement sort of changed in the pandemic years, especially after they I think first put an end to these large-scale mobilizations on the streets. Some movements went online. I think there was a lot more retrospective discussions maybe. Do you think this period also led to more reflection on the movement? How do you think like 2020 and 21, what do you think that these years mean for the climate justice movement?
Yeah, I think it was definitely like a hard time in a way that, but at the same time in a good way, because I think I've seen then many public climate schools being organized, many online webinars being organized, and really getting into discussions about many different things. So I think that was used the best way possible, I would say, the way I have seen it. It was really, I mean, again, but because my understanding and my reflection is quite like limited to the groups in the German Fridays, and also the international, like the MAPA, and then the bit that I've met some of the groups in Europe, in Sweden, and also from other parts. But I think that has given a lot of scope to then organize differently, read, explore a lot of digital strategies, and kind of, I think the fact that there was still momentum and the movement kept doing things, that's really great. And then it also still like there was this different scope of discussing things, maturing, exploring different discussions, like different avenues around those political discussion. And the other bit, I think one thing that I've heard from some and also see like since like, but then when the lockdown ended, or the kind of corona ended, it feels like that, like the mobilization has, like the interest has moved a bit, and people coming out of like a really long lockdown, there's this hunger to do something else. And at the same time, with a lot of the different political changes in Germany, but also in a lot of these global bits, there is not like, again, a one clear big demand that the movement is, it has become as it has become specific, it has also changed for many different country contexts. It sometimes feels like there is not a one big demand to rally everyone behind. So I think that's also the bit, maybe the challenge at the moment, and to find ways what it could mean, and so that it doesn't, so the challenge that what it could mean, and then move forward with it.
Right. And do you have any opinion on that? How do you think should the movement move forward now, coming out of the pandemic, with this diagnosis that you've put? Do you think it should rally around one demand? Do you think it should use a different strategy?
I think it's very reasonable why there isn't like very one clear demand. And I think a lot of the movements are also engaging more with their own country context and with the local groups to some degree. But there is this definitely the need to still be able to come together and show the strength, or create this sense of connectivity, at least to certain moments. And I think for that, like global strikes still, and I think like maybe there are still, of course, then this thought to do global strike, what could be useful, or I think what is a challenge then, to find the demand that could demonstrate the escalation of, because then we cannot be doing the same like global strike with the same demands anymore, right? Like what was last year, or what was the year before. So for 2019, what was meaningful or powerful in 2019, maybe for 2020 we need another additional layer to that makes people feel inspired. So maybe in many ways we need to find ways to then start naming also the challenges that, like, despite bringing so many people in the streets, why haven't we seen clear changes? And maybe then it makes sense to start naming those, start naming what's blocking it, and kind of find ways to then attack that, like clearly address those at the heart, and kind of keep still saying that we are still here and we're still not buying your bullshit. So kind of maybe those kind of what I'm trying to say is like this, it needs to have that additional power, like those kind of that message delivery. And at the same time, maybe there could be intersectional work, like maybe this could be another time when we explore and see if as many groups we can bring on board and build bridges with, and can give this like that layer of where it really feels like it's not just people coming from different paths, but at the same time also different movements coming together as well. So because I think for a long time it was like this huge movement that brought people together, and then the next level could be this powerful sense of bringing also different movements together, like movement of movements. So maybe that could be this escalation this time, where we create that sense, like making a movement of movements and kind of really coming together with this another escalated message, or the urgency hasn't gone away, so why are you not doing things yet? So this kind of, I don't know what else it could be, but then we need to power up the game. I think like that would be great.
Right. So naming and shaming capitalism, colonialism, patriarchy, etc., and to reach out to other movements as well. I would love to hear for you personally, what's in the next few years. Is there anything that you are looking forward to working on? Anything?
Yeah, I think it's then specifically about this around the intersectionality. Then I'm trying to still kind of similarly learning or finding ways to build more bridges and bring forward. So professionally in my work, I focus a lot on fossil fuel and finance, so kind of cutting the flow of money to the fossil fuel businesses. And that also means kind of really making sure like that itself, this includes like a decolonial narrative and anti-capitalist, like how do you address the finance, but at the same time it's fundamentally very like capitalist, but then what it could mean to then still bring movements together, put in their ongoing demands, and then find ways to build bridges. And beyond that, trying to build like network, like a BIPOC climate justice, like this anti-racist, but at the same time really empowering these different groups who have this vision and kind of channel resources and make that stronger. So kind of really working on the ground and make more and more actors active and coming up, showing up to the movement. I think that's really something that I find like I want to work in the next weeks and next years. And just as we were talking, like the narrative, as I said, like I think in these 2 years, the movement has become very mature in many ways, but then there's still quite a long way to go. So we do talk like there's way more interest to work with this decolonial like kind of really building more collective campaign for global North-South, really talking about responsibility of German companies for the climate destruction, different businesses. And I think that work could happen more. And beyond that, then kind of creating, maybe really mainstreaming a lot of this. We talk a lot that we want to learn from indigenous communities. We want to have their leadership, but that could mean also then learning and integrating the worldview they have, and what then it could mean to integrate those kind of worldview and thoughts into then the policy suggestions that we're coming up for climate solution. So these are kind of some of the things I feel strongly interested in, and I want to, would like to explore. And another thing, wait, I forgot I wanted to say about this. And I think one thing that we also still need to do quite a bit is that the movement, we have also achieved quite a few things. And I think it could also be useful to name those and kind of see that it does make a difference. I think celebrating and naming the achievements or the path we have walked is also important. Otherwise, it could feel like, oh, we are not doing anything, nothing is changing. I mean, of course, the change is not as fast and as rapid as we need, but at the same time, we need to keep naming what we have achieved, what are the ways that things have worked great, and then to do more of those. So as you were saying before, then this Japan declaring they don't want to support anymore and invest in Bangladesh coal, which there was lots of work happening. And there's also the Fridays for Future Japan, Fridays for Future Bangladesh doing things together, and lots of this huge civil society work that went behind. But these are kind of the like the wins that we need to look at and learn, and then see like, yeah, how can we replicate maybe then more of these? How can we do more of this? Yeah, I think that's another very important bit that we have to keep doing.
That sounds all very, very exciting. Before we finish this interview, I would like to hear, is there anything that you would tell someone who wants to be engaged in the climate justice movement? Where do you think should they go? And what do you think would be something they should consider working on?
Mm-hmm. I think the first thing is then just for like, I want them to know that we need you, like the movement needs you. We need everybody, and all of us can do something. So not one person would change it. Definitely, we need everyone in this, and everyone can do something. So I would say, start. If you think you want to do something, start looking up, start reading, reach out, find people who are like you, and find something that inspires you and that you want to do. And that's already a starting point. And yeah, find friends, make a group, start reading, start showing up in streets, start joining a protest. This is a long, exciting, wonderful journey. And through this, you would probably make the best friends of your life, most amazing experiences. And at the same time, even more, if you feel helpless by looking at the state of the world, know that you can do something about it. And yeah, when you join, we all feel a little less helpless. So please join.
Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed the interview. Feel free to check out the other episodes as well. And I hope you have a great day wherever you are.